Danger on Copper Mountain. Text by Ed Hansen. Illustrations by Roseanne Heidman. Ethan, Will and Alex are going to climb Copper Mountain. But the rain-soaked mountain has a nasty surprise in store for the boys. Ethan and Alex are caught up in a daring rescue operation when Will is injured. Danger on Copper Mountain. Text by Ed Hansen. Illustrations by Roseanne Heidman. Chapter 1. Ethan Porter sat on his porch staring out at the rain. When is it going to stop? He thought. This is the 4th rainy day in a row. Ethan had just finished his first year of university and was looking forward to the holidays. He had a job lined up as a lifeguard at the town pool, starting in 10 days. He had been elected captain of the university swimming team, and this job meant he could train all holidays. He was only a few seconds off the state record in the 100-metre butterfly. So it was important that he stay in good shape. As he sat there staring at the rain, he saw his friend, Will Marks, running up the street. Will bounded up the steps, dripping wet. He stood on the porch grinning at Ethan, while a puddle formed at his feet. "What are you so happy about?" Ethan asked. "Don't you listen to the weather report? The rain is going to stop this afternoon," Will answered. "So we can finally leave on our camping trip tomorrow morning." Ethan thought for a moment and then said, "Gee, I don't know. The forest will be soaking wet." "So what? A little water never hurt anyone." "Maybe not," answered Ethan, "but being soaking wet all day can be uncomfortable." "My dad is all set to drive us up to Copper Mountain in the morning. Get your gear packed and be ready at 7 o'clock, Will said. "Okay," Ethan said grudgingly, "but I still think we should wait a few days until things dry out." "We've already waited almost a week. Besides, you're a swimmer. You should love the water." "Oh, one other thing," added Will. "My little brother Alex wants to come with us. He's 10 now, so he can carry his own gear." "That's fine with me. I like Alex. He's a good kid," said Ethan. "Great!" Will jumped off the porch and ran off down the street, trying to dodge the raindrops. Ethan watched him go. He still thought it was a bad idea to go camping so soon after all the rain. He sat for a few moments longer and then went inside to begin packing. Copper Mountain was a 2,500-metre peak, 32 kilometres north of town. It got its name because of the copper mines that had once been there. The last mine had shut down 20 years ago. Today the mountain was mostly deserted, except for hunters in the autumn and occasionally climbers. The plan was for Mr. Marks to drop the boys off at Copper Mountain in the morning and pick them up 3 days later at 4 o'clock. They would sleep in a tent, cook over an open fire, and, they hoped, make it to the summit. Will was bringing a mobile phone so that they could call for help if they had any trouble. That afternoon the rain stopped, just like Will had said it would. Maybe this won't be so bad after all, Ethan thought, as the sun peeked through the clouds. On his bedroom floor he laid out his sleeping bag and all the cooking utensils they would need. Then he added his clothing, an axe for chopping firewood, and a large tarpaulin in case it rained again. The boys had carefully planned their food for the trip, and bringing it was Will's responsibility. Chapter 2. Promptly at 7 o'clock the next morning, Mr. Marks drove up in front of Ethan's house. Ethan loaded his gear into the back of the four-wheel drive and jumped into the back seat with Alex. Spirits were high, and there was a lot of joking and laughing as they headed out of town. When they reached the car park at the base of the mountain, Mr. Marks helped the boys unload their equipment. "I'd like to stay and watch you get started, but I have to go to work," he said. As he drove off, he yelled, "Have a great time, guys. Use that mobile phone if you run into any trouble. And you do as the older boys tell you, Alex." Alex waved goodbye to his father, and the boys strapped on their backpacks. Ethan and Will were carrying 18 to 22 kilograms, Alex about 9 kilograms. They would be stopping every 30 minutes or so to rest. Since the lower part of the mountain had a very gentle slope, the climb started off fairly easy. But as they got further up the mountain, the climb became harder. 2 hours into their hike, they came to what would normally have been a fairly small stream. But 4 days of heavy rain had turned it into a raging river. The boys stood quietly at the edge of the running water, looking both ways. Finally, Ethan asked, "How are we going to cross this?" Will smiled. "Don't worry, Ethan. You and Alex go upstream for 10 minutes and I'll go downstream. Then we meet back here. I bet one of us finds a place to cross." Will was right. A few hundred metres upstream, Ethan and Alex found a large tree that had fallen across the stream. After collecting Will, the boys studied the scene. The tree was wet and slippery, so they decided to take off their packs and try out the crossing in case someone fell in. Will was the first to cross. He reached the other side without a problem and stood on the far bank grinning at the other two. "Who's next?" he yelled. Ethan hopped onto the log. He was past the halfway mark when he lost his balance and fell off. The current carried him downstream for 20 metres before he was able to make it to the bank and pull himself out of the water. Both Alex and Will were struggling to hold back their laughter. Ethan looked across at Alex and said, "I don't know why you think that was so funny. You haven't made it across yet." "No, but I will." The 10-year-old jumped up on the wet tree and tiptoed across without a problem. "Okay," Ethan said. "Since you two are such acrobats, you can bring the packs across. Bring mine first so I can get out of these wet clothes." By the time Alex and Will had brought all the gear across, Ethan had changed into dry clothes. As they started off again, Will said, "I wish I'd brought my camera." "A photo of our great swimming captain floundering in the water would be worth a lot of money at uni." "Yeah," added Alex, "the swimming coach would probably buy the first copy." Ethan ignored the good-natured teasing. "It's a long trip," he thought. "I'll get even." An hour later, the boys surprised a deer and her fawns in amongst the trees. The deer jumped up right in front of Ethan and bounced off. The boys looked at each other in excitement. The trip was going well. Chapter 3. It was 4 in the afternoon when Will said, "It's getting late and I'm tired. Let's call it a day." There was no argument from Ethan or Alex. A short distance from where they had stopped, they found a thick stand of trees. "This should give us protection from the wind," Ethan said. Getting a fire going took a while because all the wood was wet, but they soon had a roaring fire. Will was in charge of the cooking. "We'll be eating in no time," he said. He cut up and boiled some potatoes. He heated up some sausages and green beans. They were all hungry after the long hike, and the food tasted especially good. "Gee, Will, I didn't know you could cook like that," Alex said, teasing. "There are a lot of things you don't know about me," Will replied with a grin. After eating, they looked up at the stars in the clear, black sky. Alex said, "This is what camping is all about. Thanks for letting me come along." "It sure is beautiful out here," Ethan added. "I hate to put a damper on you nature lovers, but we have a long, tough day tomorrow," said Will. "And don't forget, it gets steeper. If we want to get to the top, we'd better get a good night's sleep." By 9 o'clock, all 3 boys were in their sleeping bags, fast asleep. Chapter 4. The next morning after a good breakfast, the boys packed up and started off. They hadn't gone more than 800 metres when they came to the edge of a deep quarry. It looked like the surface of the moon. This was an old abandoned copper mine. There was a collection of shacks off to one side. The boys took their torches from their packs and stepped into the cool darkness of one of the shacks. All kinds of equipment had been left lying around inside. Picks and shovels and a block and tackle with what must have been 100 metres of rope. "Do you think some of this stuff is still usable?" Alex asked. "Yes," replied Will. "That is, if someone wants to lug it down the mountain." After 20 minutes of exploring the shacks, the boys continued on their way. The climbing was definitely harder now. In addition to the steeper slope, the muddy ground made the walking slippery. Falling down became a regular event. It wasn't long before all three boys were covered with mud. At noon, they stopped to take a lunch break. They slipped off their backpacks, glad to be free of their weight. Will bent forward to stretch his back muscles and then straightened up. He said, "I'm going to check up ahead a little way. Maybe there is a stream where we can clean up a bit. I'll be back in a few minutes." Meanwhile, Alex looked for a good spot to spread out the food. Ethan sat on a tree trunk and kicked his heels against the side to knock loose some of the mud from his boots. He brushed at the dirt on the legs of his pants. Will had hardly disappeared from sight when Ethan and Alex heard a low, eerie rumble. The whole mountain seemed to shake for a few moments, and then everything was quiet. "What was that?" said Alex nervously. "I don't know," Ethan answered, "but it seemed to come from up ahead. Come on, let's go and have a look." They hadn't gone 200 metres when they reached the tree line. Ahead of them was a large open area without a single tree, and something they had never seen before. The surface soil in this open area was moving down the mountain. Slowly but steadily, what must have been thousands of tons of mud, rocks and other debris were flowing down the slope into a deep ravine to the left. Ethan was the first to realise what had happened. All the rain has made the soil really unstable, and with no trees in this area, there is no root system to hold the soil in place. Suddenly Alex shouted, "Ethan, where's Will?" They rushed to the edge of the ravine and looked down. There, 10 metres below them, and half buried in mud, lay Will. He wasn't moving. Alex and Ethan shouted Will's name, but he didn't respond. "This is bad," Ethan said as calmly as he could. "And Will has the mobile. We can't even call for help." "What can we do?" gasped Alex. "We can't get down there, and even if we could, there is no way we would ever get back out," thought Ethan. "But if we don't do something fast, another mudslide will bury him completely." "Think, Ethan, think," Alex pleaded. He was fighting back tears as he looked down at his brother. They stood in silence for a few minutes, staring down at the bottom of the ravine. Suddenly Ethan shouted, "The copper mine!" Alex looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "The copper mine we saw this morning had a block and tackle in it and lots of rope. If we could bring that up here, we could hook it to something secure and pull Will up." "I don't think we can pull Will up. He's pretty heavy, you know." "Alex, you don't understand. A block and tackle makes lifting heavy things much easier. A man can lift 5 or 6 times as much as he normally could." "But Ethan, we were in that mine 3 hours ago. By the time we get back here with the block and tackle, it'll be dark." "Not if we run all the way there. It's all downhill. That should give us enough time to get back in the light." Chapter 5. Ethan wasn't sure that his plan would work. But what other choice did they have? They had no way to call for help, and they were a full day's walk from the foot of the mountain. Ethan thought that they could make it back to the mine in less than an hour because they wouldn't be carrying their heavy backpacks, and it was all downhill. But he hadn't reckoned on the muddy, slippery track. As they ran, he and Alex spent as much time sliding on their backs as they did walking on their feet. Still, they arrived at the old mine in just 40 minutes. But they were totally exhausted and covered with more mud than ever. Both boys sagged to the ground to take a rest. "You know, Ethan," said Alex, "I don't want to be negative or anything, but we don't know if Will is badly hurt, or even if he is alive." Ethan looked at Alex. "Don't think like that. He'll be okay. But we have to get him out before there's another slide. Alex, there is one other thing." "What's that, Ethan?" "One of us has to go down into the ravine to help Will. Whoever stays up top has to be strong enough to pull the others out. I am big enough and strong enough to do that. I don't think you are, Alex." "I've been thinking about that too. I know it has to be me, but I don't mind. After all, he is my brother." Ethan smiled. "You make me wish I had a little brother, kid." After a 5-minute rest, they went into the mine and got the block and tackle. It was heavier than Ethan had expected and awkward to carry. He sighed to himself. It was going to be tough enough climbing a steep mountain covered with slippery mud without having to carry the heavy block and tackle too. They had a real tough job ahead of them, especially Alex. They started up the track, slipping on mud the whole way. It seemed like Alex wanted to rest every 15 minutes, but Ethan pushed him on. "Every minute counts," he said. It was 3 o'clock when they staggered to the edge of the tree line and looked out onto the field of mud. They threw down their load and went to the edge of the ravine. Will was still there much as they had left him, but something was different. Ethan stared at his friend for a moment and then yelled, "He's alive!" "How do you know?" asked Alex. "When we left him, his arm was over his head. Now it's at his side. He must have moved it. You stay here and talk to him while I find a place to hook up this gear." About 7 meters from the edge of the ravine, Ethan spotted a large rock on a level spot. "This is perfect," he thought, as he worked to secure the block and tackle to the rock. Alex yelled, "Will is moving and trying to say something." "Tell him you are going down to help him," Ethan yelled back. Alex was frightened at the prospect of being lowered down the mountain. He looked at the unstable, wet soil. Then he looked at the steep walls of the ravine. But then he looked at the limp body of his older brother and forced those thoughts from his mind. He would do what he had to do. Chapter 6. The boys were ready. Ethan made a loop in the rope and slipped it under Alex's arms. "Now remember all that rock climbing in the gym? It's the same thing. I'll lower you down backwards. When you get to the bottom, get Will free from the mud and slip the loop under his arms. Yell up to me when you're ready and I'll pull him up. Then I'll throw the loop back down to you. I reckon I should have both of you up here in less than 10 minutes from now." Alex didn't say a word, but his face was pale. Ethan knew he was scared and that the longer they delayed, the worse it would get. He took the strain of the block and tackle as Alex stepped over the edge. Alex couldn't believe how slick the sides of the ravine were. A goat couldn't climb this, he thought. He moved slowly deeper into the ravine. When he hit the bottom, he sank into 10 centimeters of soft, gooey mud. His brother lay 3 meters away. Alex struggled through the mud to reach him. "Will," he said quietly, "I'm going to slip this loop under your arms and Ethan is going to pull you out of here." Will opened his eyes and nodded. Then he said in a low voice, I think my arm may be broken, so go easy, okay? Alex's heart leapt. At least Will was well enough to talk. As Alex moved Will's arm to get the loop under it, Will let out a cry of pain. Ethan looked nervously into the ravine at the sound of Will's cry. "Okay, take him up," Alex shouted. "But be careful, Ethan. He has a broken arm." But Ethan couldn't worry about his friend's arm. He had to get him up as quickly as possible. Will screamed in pain as he banged against the side of the ravine. At last Ethan pulled Will onto solid ground. Then he lifted the rope over Will's shoulders and threw it back down. "Hurry, Alex, hurry!" Ethan yelled. Suddenly there was a roar as more mud was dislodged on the mountain and moved towards the ravine. Alex was frozen with fear as he watched the 3-metre wall of mud rumbling towards him. The noise made it even more frightening. "Alex, grab the rope! Quickly!" Ethan yelled again. Alex only had time to put the loop under one arm when Ethan started to pull. Ethan continued to pull as hard as he could, not knowing that Alex was struggling to hold on to the rope with just one arm. When Alex reached the top, Ethan pulled him away from the edge onto solid ground. Alex sat on the ground next to his brother with his head in his hands. "You're okay, Alex. You did just about the bravest thing I ever saw," Ethan said as he put his arm around the 10-year-old. Ethan looked at Will. "How are you doing, mate?" he asked. Will opened his eyes. "I didn't think I'd ever get out of there. How did you do it?" "We got the block and tackle from the old mine. Without that, and your little brother, I don't know what we would have done," Ethan answered. "Now, if I make a splint for your arm, do you think you can walk?" "I think so, at least for a little way." "Well, we don't have to worry about that until morning. It will be dark soon, so we had better think about setting up camp. At least there is one good thing about the accident." "What's that?" Will asked. "We had taken off our packs before you fell, so we didn't lose any gear." Alex put his arm around his brother and said, "I'm glad you're all right, Will." Ethan smiled and said, "Alex is a hero." Despite his aching arm, Will forced a smile. "I suppose this means I'll have to let you come on every camping trip from now on, huh?" "Maybe," Alex said with a grin. Chapter 7. Ethan and Alex made Will as comfortable as they could. He had some cuts and bruises, but the only serious injury seemed to be his broken arm. Ethan cut some branches and made a splint for the arm. Alex cut a piece of the tarp and rigged a sling. He gave Will aspirin from their first aid kit and wrapped a blanket round his shoulders. "That should help a little bit," Ethan said as he started cutting wood for the fire. Alex called his father on the mobile. "Hi, Dad, it's Alex," he said. "Is everything okay, Alex?" asked his dad. "Not exactly, Dad. The rain caused a mudslide and Will got swept into a ravine. Ethan and I got him out, but he's a bit banged up and we are pretty sure he has broken his arm." "Where are you now?" "We're still far up the mountain. We didn't want to try coming down in the dark. We're camping here for the night and we'll start down at first light. Can you meet us at the car park around 10? "Of course I can. But are you boys going to be able to make it down? Perhaps I should send someone to get you." "No, we should be all right. Ethan says going down will be a lot faster than climbing up." "Okay, Alex. I'll be waiting for you in the morning. Let me talk to Will." Will took the phone and said, "Hi, Dad." "Hi, son. Alex says you may have a broken arm." "Yes, but it could have been much worse. Alex and Ethan saved my life. We'll tell you all about it tomorrow." "Okay, But if you have a problem coming down, stay put. I will get helicopter rescue to come and get you. None of them slept very well that night. Will's aches and pains kept him awake. Alex couldn't get the memory of the wall of mud out of his mind. And Ethan's arms throbbed from lugging the heavy block and tackle from the mine and pulling his two friends out of the ravine. By dawn, they were packing up and getting ready to head out. Alex and Ethan took turns helping Will, particularly over the steepest parts. The last thing they wanted was for him to fall. By 8:30, they had reached the mine where the block and tackle had been. "Let's take a 10-minute break," said Ethan. Will looked at his watch. "There's no way we'll be off this mountain by 10, he said. "I reckon it will be closer to 11, said Ethan. "At least the worst part is over. It will be easier walking from here." After a while they reached the stream where Ethan had fallen in. The raging torrent of 2 days ago was once again a gentle stream, so crossing would be no problem. Ethan said, "You know, guys, we're all covered in mud. It might not be a bad idea to clean up a bit." Will laughed. "You're right, Ethan. I had forgotten how dirty we were. Let's do it." They took towels from their packs and washed their hands and faces. Alex helped his brother clean up. When they were finished, Ethan said, "We're still pretty dirty, but your dad will let us in his car now." Refreshed and a little cleaner, they continued on their way. Eventually Will yelled, "I see the car park in my dad's car." There were actually 2 cars waiting for them because Ethan's dad had come as well. After relieved greetings, Will and his father headed for the hospital for a medical checkup and x-rays. As they drove off, Ethan yelled, "Good luck, Will. I'll check in with you this afternoon." Then Ethan's dad took the 2 weary rescuers back to town. As he drove, he said, "All right, boys, tell me all about the past couple of days." Ethan looked at Alex and then at his father. "I will sometime, I promise, Dad. But just for now, I want to forget all about Copper Mountain," he sighed. Make a newspaper front page about... Make your own picture. Click on Help to watch a demonstration. Complete your ID by typing in your name. Click Next when you have finished. Set a date. Choose the month. Choose the day. Great, that's today's date. Type in a name for your newspaper. Click on a headline for your story. Wet weather makes for risky camping. Type your story. Drag a picture for your story onto the newspaper front page. Click Next when you've finished. Write a caption or label for the picture. Check your newspaper carefully. If you want to make any changes, click on the Revise button beside the part you want to change. Otherwise, click on Publish to make your newspaper. You can print your newspaper or play again.
Story Toolbox. Type your name and click Next. Create a new... Have fun clicking on the buttons. Then drag items onto the board to make a picture. Type or write your story underneath the picture. Click Next to make another page or click Finish to view your story. Fantastic work! Click Save to save your story, click Print to print your story, or click Start Again to make another story.